Hello. We're nearing the end of the illustration part. How are your illustrations going? In offline classes, I share opinions with my students as they finish their work, but it's regretful that online class is a one-way street. So I'm trying to show you as much as I can. The parts where drawers get stuck are either similar or the same, so I hope I'm showing solutions for the problem you're facing, or you'll be facing through my class. As we near the end of the part, let's look into the ways of raising the quality and finishing off the illustration. When is a good drawing finished? We always want to produce a better piece than the ones we've drawn before. Also, we hope for our works to gain more popularity. It's natural. There's no one who wants to draw worse pieces. I've told you this before, but it's important to set a goal as you draw. You may have set a goal for the illustration you're drawing this time. If you plan to draw it like a game portfolio and tried to draw a good piece to be used in a game, you may have added a strong impact or taken time planning various drafts so you could draw a piece you won't regret. You're doing well if this is the case. However, the compulsion to become better sometimes makes people try to be better at many things at once. Drawings are easily accessible on social media these days, so people want to do everything better. Things such as processing, using color, using light, and the fundamental drawing too. It's great. Having a goal and advancing toward it is good, but it'll be hard to do everything well all together in this exercise because we're trying to show something we're not capable of. There are things that aren't familiar to us since it'll be different from our usual drawings. The odds are it'll look strange to your eyes. You may want to keep changing it or try to go back to the original style. The new style is foreign for you by its nature, but you may doubt yourself as you try to contain everything. It's likely for the drawing to turn out obscure. If you're trying something new, the eyes, the brain, and the hands need some time to get used to the new thing. This is why I emphasize the importance of going up one step at a time. Everything has its own proper pace, and it'll also be different for each and every person. Let's look back and try to remember why you started drawing this illustration. It'd be great if you have made a planning note. Check what you wanted to show through the illustration. Also, check if you've been tempted by other things like a great drawing by other artists on social media, and see if you tried to imitate it. Were you able to show the things you plan to depict? If so, you're doing great. It's okay, even if the illustration doesn't receive as well as you expected, as long as you acquired the knowledge you targeted. The knowledge has become a part of you now, and you can utilize it anytime. It has raised your proficiency. Even if it's not received as much as you'd hoped, try to focus on the things you earned. Do you have to be popular right at the moment? Do you have to have millions of followers and get a job at a big company right now? Don't rush yourself. It's successful as long as you earn the knowledge. One more thing. As you add many things into the drawing, they may raise the density, but the theme of the drawing or the message might not be conveyed. Density is not the indicator of completion. I told you this in the last chapter as well. Of course, the density of a drawing affects the quality of the drawing, but does a high density mean a finished drawing? Even if the main theme has been smothered, can you call a drawing dense from top to bottom a good finished one? Does that mean cel-shaded animation style is bad? The reason we draw is to convey what we want to express. But if that's not conveyed at all, I think it's rather a regretful completion. A drawing is finished when the things you want to express is shown properly. There are plenty of convoluted modern art pieces out there, a piece with just a dot on the canvas, or another with only a few rough brushstrokes. However, they all show the intention of the artists. They minimize their depiction to convey their message clearly. For example, if the artist drew a dot on a white canvas to grab the attention and intended to make the audience question what they should make of it, then we can say the piece is complete and successful because it manipulated the audience as intended. Likewise, you don't have to think completion is difficult. Once the drawing you planned at the beginning has been implemented, then it's a completed work. Others can't define the completion of your drawing. If you say it's completed, then it is. If you say otherwise, then it's not. So, it's important to show your intention so that you can confidently say that it's completed as you intended. Let's check if your drawing is being produced close to your intention as we proceed with the chapter. First, be distant and objective. To see if you're advancing in a right direction, you have to judge your drawing as you produce it. You may have done this before. We have judged our rough drafts thinking certain parts as good, but others as poor. Or you may have thought a certain draft is showing the theme well, but that other one is not. As you add more to the drawing, you have to check the drawing in between. Check if what you want to depict is drawn well, and if it's represented clearly. If you're good at planning and progressing with it, this may come to you as a hassle, but look at it differently for a better quality. You may have been absorbed by the drawing and missing some things. In this case, stand up and look at the drawing. Look at it through your phone or post it on a private social media to look at it. These change the surrounding colors of the drawing so it can provide a new set of eyes. Leave your desk for a while for different activities like washing dishes, cleaning, chatting with friends, or going out to get coffee. These make your eyes unfamiliar with the drawing, so it puts you in an objective perspective again. The judgment of your eyes gets blurred as you draw, and you can't figure out whether it's good or not, or if the human body is drawn well. Then, try to refresh yourself this way, or look at the drawing in a different environment. Think about whether your planning is out of your greed, or if it was influenced by others. You may have seen a well-drawn art on social media and tried to add something that goes against the theme of your drawing. After putting some thoughts into it, if you want to change or reinforce certain things, feel free to do so. It indicates that you put more effort than usual. For your information, checking your drawing shouldn't be done regularly every minute. It may rather ruin your drawing. For those who have similar personality as I do, we try to find only the bad things about it, so we keep trying to change things. I was almost pathologic with changing the drawing constantly, but I've gotten much better now. It's easier to find bad things than good things. Check your drawings only in between the selected stages. For example, you can decide to check it after you sketch, or after you draw the human figure. Select the right timing for you to check this way. Check before you finish it as well. It gives you a solid idea when to check your drawing. As you check your drawing, try not to find bad things on purpose. If it looks okay at a glance, then you can move on. You don't have to change every time you check. When you check the drawing, it's likely to spot something you're missing, so be aware of it. The more important thing is to focus on the initial goal, so your judgment doesn't get excessive. See if the theme is shown well, if the drawing is recognizable, and if the aesthetic elements such as the visual path are set up well, and if your challenge was carried out properly. Checking these things is enough. Don't try too hard to produce a perfect piece beloved by everyone. Such drawing doesn't exist. Just focus on the things you tried to be good at. That makes you step up with your skills and grows your proficiency because you have executed your plans and achieved your goals. You may suddenly think the face of the character is weird and not caught up with the trend. So you may change the face, or you could think your drawing is not fancy enough. So you add elements like weird jewels. These things may instead ruin your drawing. This may raise the quality, but it can never make the drawing perfect. Any drawings are loved by only some people. You'll lose them too if you mix too many things. Is that understood? Keeping these things alone will allow you to complete drawings excellently. Be aware of the items of the list, and let's try to check drawings objectively. Get rid of depictions. I talked about it in the last chapter. Adding and subtracting, adding and subtracting. It's time to subtract since we added last time. Those who are somewhat proficient at drawing would be good at this as well, so some may not need to subtract depictions. However, there'd be more people who don't know this, so let's look into it together. There aren't many people who can show the theme well from the beginning. You may have raised the density to the point where you don't have any more to draw. This is where you'd think you're either finished or close to finishing it. You may have checked the drawing objectively then. As you check it objectively, if the theme is smothered by others, or if the density of each part is too high, and too many things are seen, be bold in subtracting depicted elements. It may feel wasteful, or you may have had fun drawing certain things, so you may want to keep those. I was like that too. I depicted even the shoestrings, each of the eyelets on a dress shirt, and I also drew leaves on a distant tree, one by one, thinking it looked nice. Depicting things can be fun because you're drawing something you know freely. You may know that feeling of drawing things you know confidently. Unfortunately, we're not the artists that draw only one object or one element, so be patient and look at the drawing objectively to show the things people want to see. The first method is darkening. It's a method to darken revealed elements that you think is unnecessary and emphasize the theme element. Make the texture less detailed if it was depicted. You may feel sad getting rid of them, but if you add too many elements, it'd be no different from a movie with top celebrity extras. They'll overshadow the main character. Let's hide the minor elements to show the main character. It's unfortunate, but extras should act like extras. Let's take this drawing as an example. Suppose you want to emphasize the face or the upper body of the character, but you may think this clock-shaped bag has an excessively high density. Then, you can use a layer in the darken mode to make the element darker. It's a blend mode that turns colors darker in a layer. You can darken an element this way. If not that, you can darken this part. Let me see. I'll darken the hair and the bonnet. When this part is revealed, the Roman numbers are too noticeable, so if you want to hide these elements, you can darken them into a shadow like this. As for this part, the saturation is pretty high, but saturation shouldn't be high in a shadow, so I'll lower the saturation. I'll darken this part since it's also in the shadow. Let me see. There are folded lines on the umbrella, but I want this to have a weaker presence, so I'll bury it in a shadow. I'll show you how. A bluish shadow would be good. Darken elements this way. It's a demonstration anyway, so I'll be bold about darkening them to make the concept noticeable. If you don't care about the noticeability of the lower body or any other elements, and just need to emphasize the upper body, then darken the lower body very boldly. Bury them in a shadow. The saturation is still high even in the shadow, so lower the saturation as well. Where else should we darken? Let's darken the hair in the back. You may feel sad hiding the elements. At first, it may feel like you subtracted too much, and the drawing may not feel dense enough, but you're only finding it like so compared to before. You should be aware that the density of your drawing is actually not too low. Let's darken this chunk of hair and this lock as well. Let's go with the concept of hiding this part. Let me try with a weak shadow. Is it too awkward? I'll erase a little bit. Let's check it. Check it at a distance. This part looks more noticeable than before. I'll use an overlay layer to emphasize the borders to clearly show the darkened area.
확실히 묻었어. 여기서부터 여기까지 어두워. 하고.
I think I can darken this part of the hair. I forgot to do it. Darken it since it's also in the back.
묻어주고.
This is a method of darkening elements that are not included in the theme area.
외에 다른 부분들을 이렇게 그림자로 묻는 방법이 하나 있습니다.
It's one of the ways to drop the density. It naturally drops the density. We can see too much in this state. We have to drop the density to reveal the theme. Remember this method. The second method uses aerial perspective. You may have heard of the term. It's a phenomenon where the colors and the outlines of distant objects become blurry. Many think they have to use a blue color for the aerial perspective, but to be exact, the colors of distant objects get closer to the color of the atmosphere. When the atmosphere is blue, the object turns closer to blue due to the distance. If the atmosphere is white, the object looks gray. During an intense sunset, we can see distant objects become red as well. Let's look at this photo. The sky is blue now. The distant objects are blurred into blue as well. The sky is red in this photo, so the distant buildings are blurred to be red.
그려지고 있습니다.
Our sites contain not only objects, but also the atmosphere, so the light reflected off the atmosphere interacts with the object to make it blue and blurry.
사물을 푸르게 보이게, 흐릿하게 보이게 하는 거죠.
Various elements like steam, fog, rain, dust, or smoke either absorb or curve light to show us many different phenomena. Thus, like the effect of darkening elements, the aerial perspective can be used to emphasize the theme area or separate the character from the background. You may have seen drawings with limbs blurred blue, even though they seem to be close to the camera.
봐오셨을 것 같은데요.
This is when aerial perspective is exaggerated to show the theme better. Let's look at my drawings, for example.
볼게요.
If you look at the fan art of Chi-Chi on the left, everything has been blurred except the theme parts of the face, the upper body, and the arms.
뿌옇게 흐리게 처리를 했습니다. 여기
You can see how the drawing was blurred with a blue color. However, it doesn't look that awkward. It's nice since the upper body catches the eyes. Even if you exaggerate the aerial perspective, it doesn't look that awkward. Let's look at the fan art of Ninome Inanis. The back looks blue being covered by the atmosphere. It leads the attention to the face, the arm, and the upper body of the character.
가지고 있습니다.
It creates a natural concentration of attention as the back gets blurry. If you use the aerial perspective this way, you can depict the distance of objects from the camera, even if they have the same texture and density.
표현이 이용 가능하고
It also prevents information from overflowing. For drawings with many black parts, or darkened drawings where the separation is not very clear, you can use the aerial perspective to separate elements.
이렇게 분리시켜주면 좋습니다.
Next is blurring. I'm sure you're familiar with Gaussian blur. It literally blurs an object. This method blurs the unimportant parts, or the parts far from the theme on purpose. In Photoshop, you can go to F-Filter A, Blur to see blur, and Gaussian blur. Right under the blur menu, you can find the blur gallery. The most frequently used blur is Gaussian blur. It's the basic blur. You can opt the important parts out to make it look clearer than the rest. Let's see. I'll use the same character we worked on. Let me duplicate the drawing first. Select Gaussian blur and give it a high value. After this, you can erase the part where you want to show. Let's look at other blurs. There are many options for different blurs. It'd be great if you could try them one by one. One of the most used ones is motion blur. Motion blur adds direction to the blur. For the demonstration, I'll draw some dust. Let's say they're blowing fast. I'll be giving the dust some speed to make it look like debris flying past her. Let's use motion blur for that. You can set the angle here. The dust particles will get blurred in the set angle. It makes the dust look like it's moving fast. This can be a handy effect for later. You can create a speedy look with it. I'll add black particles for better visibility. Apply the blur. Select motion blur. It looks like the particles are moving very fast. This is one of the most frequently used ones. Under the blur gallery menu, there are field blur, iris blur, tilt shift, and more. I use iris blur a lot. Let me show you. I'll duplicate the layer again. Go to Blur Gallery, Field Blur. It's great for blurring the background. There's an aperture so you can set it to adjust the blur. You can blur the background nicely with this effect. This was Field Blur. It's more detailed than other blurs. I'll show you Iris Blur. I use this most frequently. I can select an area to keep it unaffected. You can adjust the size of the area, and you can also set its direction like this. If you set the white gauge at the center, it adjusts the subtlety of the blur. You can make the blur weak. If you want to focus on the face, adjust the area so it fits the face in it. If you increase the white gauge, it makes the face clear and the rest blurred. This is what you can do with iris blur. If you blur to set the mood of the drawing, you can emphasize the theme part, so that's nice. I'll show you another way blurs are used. Let's say there are leaves around her. It's a bit out of the blue, but let's draw them. I'll draw them green. After arranging leaf-like objects in front of the camera, you can use Gaussian blur to emphasize the character. There are many ways to use blur, so I want you to try them one by one. There's one thing you need to be cautious about the blur effects. When the depiction is not done properly, or the value hasn't been set up clearly yet, using blur can make the drawing look empty. So somewhat finish the drawing, and blur the picture as a part of post-processing. Rather than using it whenever we want, it's better to use it when you're almost done, so please, be patient. Next, lower contrast in saturation and value. I talked about it as I covered the design theories. An intense color next to a theme color harms the presence of the theme color. If there are intense colors outside the theme parts, it's better to drop their intensity.
역시 낮춰주는 게 좋습니다.
The same goes for value contrast. Compared to the character in the front, the tree in the back must have a weaker contrast. Similar to aerial perspective, distant objects must be blurry. We've seen this character before. It's a character for the Year of Dogs. Orange is the dominant color in the drawing. The other colors seem to be okay, but let's emphasize the color of the orange outfit by making other parts less intense. Let's start from the floor. The orange color doesn't need to be shown here, so let's lower the saturation. The dogs and many other things are orange, so let's decrease the intensity of the orange color. Let's drop the saturation. We can also adjust the hue. Let me change the hue to make them yellow with the drop saturation. As for the back, I'll lower the saturation to make it look like they're grayish purple. Let's drop the saturation of this part as well. It's all done. Now, let's darken the dogs like we learned before. They're too noticeable. The dogs are smothering the character, so I'll darken them. When I darken something, I use a layer in the darken mode. It darkens the colors brighter than the selected ones. Darken the orange colors in other parts well. I can see intense orange here as well. Orange can be pretty tricky because the saturation goes up as it gets darker. It gives me a harder time than expected. Let me pick the color to see it. There are wrinkles on the outfit, so it takes area away from the orange area. What should I do to make it more orange? Will it be visible? I'll just forcibly increase the saturation. It's just for demonstration anyway. The saturation on the character has increased, but there are so many elements around her. Curves is great for weakening the value contrast. We've covered it before. Parts like the gear teeth in the back and the chains have a strong intensity, so let's drop them by a lot. It reveals the figure of the character so clearly. I'll darken this part as well. I wanted to use green somehow, so I used it here, but both green and the yellow green are intense, so they're haggling.
색을 넣었는데 초록색도 연두색도 생각보다 색깔이 강해서 둘이 싸우고 있네.
The elements in the back look good, but let's blur them. Now that I've blurred so much, it reveals the character so much better.
훨씬 캐릭터가 잘 보이네요.
Select the back as well. I'll blur the elements that interrupt the character. We can clearly see what was to be shown. Now that I've blurred the elements in the back, the orange stands out very well, but the biggest issue is that the brown has a high saturation as well.
이 갈색도 은근히 채도가 높단 말이죠.
The subconsciously used highly saturated colors are metal gray and brown.
갈색이 많이 써.
If you're using brown as a secondary color, you may want to keep its saturation low.
강하게 하지 않는 게 좋아.
I'll forcibly drop its saturation. I don't have other options to emphasize the orange color. The theme color doesn't have to be a single color, but it's just a demonstration for your understanding.
그냥 보여드리려고 하는 거니까 참고만 해주세요.
You can use both orange and brown for the theme. Now that the saturation has been dropped, the orange outfit of the character is more visible.
주황색이 돋보이죠? 더
It'd be better if the dogs were gone, but it'll make the drawing so empty, so I'll stop here.
그림이 다 사라질 테니까 이 정도로 알아두시면 됩니다.
Think about whether the theme is shown well,
잘
and if you think it looks too messy or unnoticeable, you can decrease the contrast in value this way, or the saturation of the elements around.
주변에 너무 화려한 것들의 채도를 낮춰주시면 되겠습니다.
It reveals the orange on the character well. It looks very clear. Now on to the last. Using the adjustments functions, I'll explain the functions of Photoshop. Since Photoshop is geared properly to handle even the photographs, there are many adjustment functions. If you go to Image, Adjustments, you'll see a lot of options. I want you to try everything here. Such options like auto tone, auto contrast, and auto color make Photoshop adjust automatically. So I want you to try them. If you look at the bottom of the layer panel, you'll see a half-filled circle.
하얀색이랑 검은색 이 반원 보일 거예요.
This creates a layer of filter, or the effects we applied.
필터, 그러니까 우리가 줄 이 효과들의 레이어를 만들어 주는 거예요.
Let me show you. I'll explain as I demonstrate it. Click the circle button.
이제
Let's see. What would be good? We've tried this one before. It's hue saturation. We have a layer dedicated to hue saturation. If I clip it to the layer under it, the filter only affects the clipped layer. You can adjust the filter and apply it only to that specific layer. If you want to adjust the affected area, click the white part of the layer.
이 하얀색 부분을 클릭하시면은
It'll show you the layer mask panel. The white area indicates the affecting area. If we erase on the canvas to shape the white area, it'll prevent the erased area from being affected. If you use the black and white button, which is a button for adjustment layer, it creates a layer so that you can process the picture more easily.
더욱더 편하게 보정할 수 있어요.
You can also go to Image, Adjustments to apply the filter directly to the layer so it permanently changes the drawing.
거기 때문에 이제 기본 파일이 손상해 가잖아요. 그래서
If you create a layer dedicated to a filter, it gets easier to process the drawing. If you don't know what to do after drawing thinking it's done, you can try these functions. Once the tools are in effect, You may get unexpected colors or create a mood that you're unfamiliar with. So when you're done drawing, toy with your curiosity on the filters.
이기는 궁금했는데 한번 써볼까 하고 써주세요.
The more you understand how to use, the more possibilities you have. Now that the basics are explained, I'll explain the frequently used functions.
위주로 설명드릴게요.
The most frequently used function is gradient map.
이거 많이 쓰죠.
It allows you to adjust colors of the value. Curves allows you to adjust RGB of the value, but this adjusts the color of each stage of value. The darkest part is colored brown now.
지금 갈색이 드리워졌죠.
If you want the darkest part to be purple, you can select purple like this.
명암이면 좋겠어. 한다면 이렇게 보라색.
Also, let's say you want the bright parts to be yellow.
그러면은 이제 노란색.
It wasn't clipped. Let's clip it first. Let me go back and see. If you want orange after yellow, then you can select it like this.
그러면 이렇게 주황색.
It's good enough. Let's set the next color to be green.
녹색이 났으면 좋겠어.
I'm using all kinds of colors now. After green, let me add turquoise in the middle.
녹색이 한번 들어가면 좋을 것 같아.
I'll select a darker color.
자,
Now that it's changed this way, it looks pretty unique.
정말 특이한 느낌이 났죠?
Try this filter. I'll change the blend mode. Since this is a layer for the filter, we can change its blend mode too.
속성을 바꿀 수가 있어요.
If you change the mode, it changes to have various looks.
이렇게도 되고, 이거
This looks pretty good. The possibilities are endless.
할 수가 있어.
Try it when you're bored.
심심할 때 해보세요.
You can find out which one looks good.
생각보다 괜찮은 듯? 이러면서.
I actually like this a lot. You can have fun with the filters like this.
재밌게 보정을 할 수 있습니다.
Next is color lookup.
컬러 룩업. 이것도
I use this function a lot as well. You'll find it around the middle. It adjusts the image through the filters made for Photoshop.
이렇게 보정이 됩니다.
It maps the existing colors using the colors of the preset to create a new look for the image. It works just like a photo processing filter. Many presets are available to purchase, so if you like this function, try using presets other people have created. These are the default filters that are made by Adobe.
만든 것들입니다. 기본이에요.
I like the looks it creates. The filter creates various looks for the image. We can change the blend mode for this one as well.
당연히 바꿀 수 있어요.
The fact that we can change the blend mode is the best thing about adjustment layers.
장점인 것 같아요. 그래서
When you process the image, try to use this function, please.
이거 꼭 이용해 주세요. 알겠죠? 자,
When we check our drawings this way, if there are elements that interrupt the theme, or if the information is overflowing, you can get rid of the interruptions this way. After you finish it, if you want to try more things, you can spend some time processing the image. The experience makes you better at using them, so try them many times. It'll make your drawing clearer and rich. Don't be obsessed with the density too much. The chapter on completing illustration is done. How was it? Do you think your illustrations will be more stable? Try to add and subtract. Focus on the things you want to depict. When I draw something, I look at the rough draft to remind myself what I wanted to show through the drawing, and try to focus back on the theme. I also create a layer for memos. I write about my weakness and bad habits to prevent myself from repeating the same mistakes, thinking I'm improving as long as I don't make the same mistakes. The part on the illustration of the concept art is already finished.
뭔가 엄청 빠르네요.
I tried to explain a lot and as clear as I could, but I prefer observing and helping directly, so it doesn't feel enough.
편이라 아쉬움이 너무 많네요.
I hope this class helps you a lot, though.
알았으면 좋겠어요.
Let me lightly explain the part we'll move on to.
설명드리자면
The next chapter is like a bonus. It'll be about VTuber. I thought it was necessary to cover it to keep up with the constantly changing trend. After that, I'll tell you how to study by yourself by figuring out what you're lacking in.
공부해 나갈 수 있도록 독학하는 방법을 준비했습니다.
I'll answer the frequently asked questions by job seekers and freelancers after that. Many have asked me how to overcome burnouts, slumps, or negative feelings. I'll also talk about how to get work and how to write an email, which are difficult but trivial problems as an artist.
도움이 되도록 준비했습니다.
I have so much left to talk about, so stick with me until the end. I'll be using my words for many things, so you can just listen in as if you're listening to a podcast. I'll see you next time. Great job stepping up today. Pat yourself on the back. I'll see you in the next chapter.